the wisest person I ever met in my life, a third grade dropout. Wisest and dropout in the same sentence is rather oxymoronic, like jumbo shrimp. Like fun run, ain't nothing fun about it. Like Microsoft Works, y'all don't hear me. I used to say like country music, but I've lived in Texas so long, I love country music now. I hunt, I fish, I have cowboy boots and cowboy, y'all, I'm a black neck redneck. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? No longer oxymoronic for me to say country music. And it's not oxymoronic for me to say third grade and dropout. That third grade dropout, the wisest person I ever met in my life, who taught me to combine knowledge and wisdom to make an impact, was my father. A simple cook. Wisest man I ever met in my life. Just a simple cook. Left school in the third grade to help out on the family farm, but just because he left school doesn't mean his education stopped. Mark Twain once said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." My father taught himself how to read, taught himself how to write, decided in the midst of Jim Crowism, as America was breathing the last gasp of the Civil War, my father decided he was going to stand and be a man. Not a black man, not a brown man, not a white man, but a man. He literally challenged himself to be the best that he could all the days of his life. I have 4 degrees. My brother is a judge. We're not the smartest ones in our family. It's a third grade dropout daddy. A third grade dropout daddy who was quoting Michelangelo, saying to us, "Boys, I won't have a problem if you aim high and miss, but I'm going to have a real issue if you aim low and hit." A country mother quoting Henry Ford, saying, "If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right." I learned that from a third grade drop. Simple lessons. Lessons like these. Son, you'd rather be an hour early than a minute late. We never knew what time it was at my house because the clocks were always ahead. My mother said for nearly 30 years, my father left the house at 3:45 in the morning. One day she asked him, "Why, Daddy?" He said, "Maybe one of my boys will catch me in the act of excellence. I want to share 2 things with you. Aristotle said you are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act." Don't ever forget that. I know you're tough, but always remember to be kind. Always. Don't ever forget that. Never embarrass mama. Yeah. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If daddy ain't happy, don't nobody care. But you know, I'm trying to tell you. Next lesson. Lesson from a cook over there in the galley. Son, make sure your servant's towel is bigger than your ego. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Y'all might have a relative in mind you want to send that to. Let me say it again. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Pride is the burden of a foolish person. John Wooden coached basketball at UCLA for a living, but his calling was to impact people. And with all those national championships, guess what he was found doing in the middle of the week? Going into the cupboard, grabbing a broom, and sweeping his own gym floor. You want to make an impact? Find your broom. Every day of your life, you find your broom. You grow your influence that way. That way you're attracting people so that you can impact them. Final lesson. Son, if you're going to do a job, do it right. I've always been told how average I can be. Always been criticized about being average. But I want to tell you something. I stand here before you, before all of these people, not listening to those words, but telling myself every single day to shoot for the stars, to be the best that I can be. Good enough isn't good enough if it can be better, and better isn't good enough if it can be best. Let me close with a very personal story that I think will bring all this into focus. Wisdom will come to you in the unlikeliest of sources, a lot of times through failure. When you hit rock bottom, remember this. While you're struggling, rock bottom can also be a great foundation on which to build and on which to grow. I'm not worried that you'll be successful. I'm worried that you won't fail from time to time. The person that gets up off the canvas and keeps growing, that's the person that will continue to grow their influence. Back in the 70s, to help me make this point, let me introduce you to someone. I met the finest woman I'd ever met in my life. Back in my day, we'd have called her a brick house. This woman was the finest woman I'd ever seen in my life. There's just one little problem. Back then, ladies didn't like big old linemen. The Blind Side hadn't come out yet. They like quarterbacks and running backs. We're at this dance, and I find out her name is Trina Williams from Lompoc, California. And we're all dancing, and we're just excited. And I decide in the middle of dancing with her that I would ask her for her phone number. Trina was the first one. Trina was the only woman in college who gave me her real telephone number. The next day, we walked to Baskin & Robbins ice cream parlor. My friends couldn't believe it. This has been 40 years ago, and my friends still can't believe it. We go on a second date, and a third date, and a fourth date. We drive from Chico to Vallejo so that she could meet my parents. My father meets her. My daddy, my hero, he meets her, pulls me to the side and says, "Is she psycho?" But anyway, we go together for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. By now, Trina's a senior in college. I'm still a freshman, but I'm working some things out. I'm so glad I graduated in 4 terms. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. So now it's time to propose. So I talk to her girlfriends, and it's California, it's in the 70s, so it has to be outside. Have to have a candle, and you have to have, some chocolate. Listen, I'm from the hood. I had a bottle of Boone's Farm wine. That's what I had. She said yes. That was the key. I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. Y'all ever been to a wedding, and even before the wedding starts, you hear this? How in the world? And it was coming from my side of the family. We get married, we have a few children, our lives are great. One day, Trina finds a lump in her left breast. Breast cancer. 6 years after that diagnosis, me and my 2 little boys walked up to Mommy's casket. And for 2 years, my heart didn't beat. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I wouldn't be standing here today. If it wasn't for those 2 little boys, there would have been no reason for which to go on. I was completely lost. That was rock bottom. You know what sustained me? The wisdom of a 3rd grade dropout. The wisdom of a simple cook. We're at the casket. I'd never seen my dad cry. But this time I saw my dad cry. That was his daughter. Trina was his daughter, not his daughter-in-law. And I'm right behind my father, about to see her for the last time on this earth. And my father shared 3 words with me that changed my life right there at the casket. It would be the last lesson he would ever teach me. He said, "Son, just stand. You keep standing. You keep standing, no matter how rough the sea, you keep standing." And I'm not talking about just water. You keep standing. No matter what, you don't give up. And as clearly as I'm talking to you today, these were some of her last words to me. She looked me in the eye and she said, "It doesn't matter to me any longer how long I live. What matters to me most is how I live." I ask y'all one question, a question that I was asked all my life by a 3rd grade dropout. How you living? How you living? Every day, ask yourself that question, how you living? Here's what a cook would suggest you to live this way. That you would not judge, that you would show up early, that you'd be kind, that you'd make sure that that servant's towel is huge and used, that if you're gonna do something, you do it the right way. That cook would tell you this, that it's never wrong to do the right thing, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And in that way, you will grow your influence to make an impact. In that way, you will honor all those who have gone before you, who have invested in you. Look in those unlikeliest places for wisdom. Enhance your life every day by seeking that wisdom and asking yourself every night, how am I living?
My grandmother became my first hero. Growing up, my grandmother never used an alarm clock. But every morning, my grandmother would wake up at 4:15. And at 4:16, her feet would hit the floor, usually right in front of my face. And that's what would wake me up. But I would lay there and I would pretend like I was still asleep because me and 4:15 really didn't get along. But Grandma would look at the back of my head. I could feel her staring at me. And then finally she would say, "Now, sugar, Grandmama know you ain't asleep. You just supposed to go on and get on up and get ready for school." And my grandmother was known for saying things that would kind of make you a little angry because they made so much sense and you couldn't argue with her. Parents, you know, there's things that when you become parents, you start to say to your own kids. Like my grandmother would say, "Now, son, you knew when you laid down there last night that you had to get up this morning. I don't know why every single morning you lay there and act surprised. You ought to be thankful that the Lord saw fit to wake you up this in your right mind." But what my grandmother was encouraging me to do was simply to be grateful for the opportunity. In spite of all that I had been through, she just wanted to make sure that I understood the opportunity that I've been given. My life got started, it was a little rough. It was a little rough start. I was born 2 months premature. My mother was walking up a flight of stairs, and she didn't know this at the time, but a woman she had an argument with earlier was standing above her holding a pot of boiling water. As my mom made her way up those stairs, that woman dumped that water onto my mom and sent her tumbling down the stairs and into premature labor. She received third-degree burns to over 25% of her body. And when we were finally allowed to leave the hospital, as you can imagine, my mom was in a great deal of pain. Those burns just barely missed her face and covered most of the front of her body. So when we got home, she began taking a heavy sedative, pain medication to help her recover. When she took that medication, it was very difficult for her to watch me, so I would bounce around a lot. I'd stay with my mom for a little bit, and then I'd go stay with Grandma, and I'd stay with some neighbors, aunties, and then back to my mother's house. I did that for the first 3 years of my life. When I was 3 years old, I was back at my mom's house, and I got into her purse, I found that medication, I swallowed everything in the bottle. When they found me, they rushed me to the hospital, and my heart would stop, and eventually I went into a coma. But because of that accident, because of that incident, the state of California, they did an investigation. And the conclusion that they came to was that it wasn't an accident. They removed me from my mother's home. I was made a ward of the state, and eventually I went into the foster care system. Shortly after I arrived to one of my foster homes, my foster mom, her name was Miss Alexander. Miss Alexander began locking me inside the closet with no light. She'd open the closet door, she'd kick me, hit me with a stick or a strap or whatever she had. It was while I was in that foster home that I was sexually abused for the first time in my life. And oftentimes people will ask, you know, if that has to be the worst thing that could happen to someone. I have scars on my body that you can't see. I have a burn here on my hand that she put there with an iron. But all of that pain went away. The worst thing that Mrs. Alexander would do is she would open the closet door, she would stand over me, and she would say, "You're stupid, and you ain't gonna never amount to nothing." And that hurt me more than any of the physical kicks or the physical pain because I believed it for a long time. I believed that I would never amount to anything, just like she said. I didn't know this at the time, I found out a little bit later, but my grandmother, my hero, she had started going back and forth to court, trying to prove that she could take care of an active, handsome little boy. And eventually the state of California, they granted her full custody of me. And I'll never forget standing on Miss Alexander's front porch waiting. She had my little belongings, everything that I had. I remember standing there, it may have only been a half an hour, but it felt like an eternity, and I can remember thinking maybe no one's coming. But after a while, at the end of the block, I see the ugliest car I've ever seen in my life. And the car pulls up right in front of the porch, and I remember all I could see are these two big glasses, bifocals. And I found out later that Grandma had glaucoma, she wasn't even supposed to be driving. But she gets out of that big car, and she's got on this white floppy hat with this, it was a flower right there in the middle. And I remember she had on this long white dress that came all the way down to her ankles. And I found out later that, that was Grandma's Sunday best. It was an outfit that she only reserved for special occasions. And I can remember for once in my life feeling like I was some special occasion.
But I remember jumping into Grandma's arms and squeezing her, and I remember her whispering and saying to me, everything's okay. You're family. And everything was okay, just like Grandmother said. And I had a lot to look forward to. I found out that my mom was going to court trying to prove that she could take care of me. And I can remember sitting there with my mother, and we talk, and we had a lot of different conversations. One thing I can remember saying, Mama, you know, one day when I get big, I'm gonna buy you a nice house with a fireplace. I said, Mama, one day I'm gonna buy you a nice car. Not like grandmama's, and get you a nice one. But the truth is, I just really wanted to become a family again, and that's what I looked forward to. When I was 12 years old, I was asleep on my grandmother's floor. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. We get a knock on the door. And it was my mom's roommate. Miss Howell, come quick. Miss Howell was my grandma. She said, come quick, it's Ruth. Ruth was my mom. She said, I can't wake her up, I think she's dead. And I can remember laying on that floor, you know, kind of wishing it was, thinking, hoping that it was maybe a dream. But it wasn't. And that's how I found out that all the hopes and dreams and things that I had to look forward to weren't going to happen. I became very angry. I became confused. I was hurt. I didn't really understand what was happening. I started acting out, hanging out with the wrong people, breaking into houses, started stealing cars. I can remember not really caring what happened to me. I continued that behavior until I was 19. When I was 19, I found myself standing in front of a judge. I was handcuffed, had a chain around my waist, and my handcuffs were attached to that chain. The judge looked at me and says, the state of California sentences you to 15 years in prison for armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. That day, when that door closed behind me for the first time as a convicted felon, I remember standing in that empty cell. I remember my knees started to get weak and they started to shake uncontrollably. I collapsed and I fell to the floor, and I just started crying alone. I can remember hearing voices. Heard the voice of my foster mom saying, you're stupid, you ain't gonna never amount to nothing. Heard the voice of family members and friends of family that said, that boy's gonna end up just like his father. My father was a career criminal, he died in prison. I can remember laying there thinking to myself that this is where I'm gonna die. But here's what happened that would change my life. Shortly after I arrived to that prison, there was an educator there. His name was Charles Lyles, 6'3", ex-Marine. And I don't know what it was about me, but every time he saw me, he'd say, hey, Mr. Humphrey. And he had this big smile on his face, a smile that my kids would say, that's creepy. But he smiled and he said, hey, Mr. Humphrey, how are you doing? He always called me Mr. Humphrey. He gave me that respect. He walked into my cell. He looked at me and he said, Mr. Humphrey, he says, prison doesn't have to be your life. He says, you can get out of here and you can do great things. He started to walk away, and before he walked out of my cell, he turned around one last time and he says, Mr. Humphrey? I said, yes, sir. He says, I believe in you. He walked out of my cell. And if he had continued to stand there, he would have seen the tears running down my face because no one had ever said that to me. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm gonna make some changes and I'm gonna change my life. And a little over 4 years after the day I originally collapsed and fell to the floor, I walked out of that prison on parole. That was over 18 years ago. I've never been back other than to mentor and help other people. But here's what I know. I know that when you've had a rough life, when you feel unwanted, I know that when you have hopes and dreams and when you have things that you can look forward to and when you have people in place that support you and push you, I know that that gives you a reason to live. It is a great day to be alive. And that's something that I haven't always said, but now it's something that I say to myself every single day at some point. If I'm having a great day or a bad day, that's something that I say. But what I also understand is that what my grandmother was thanking her higher power for each and every day was for the opportunity that she'd been given. And she never missed an opportunity to tell anyone that would listen, especially me, it's a great day to be alive.
Well, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm actually not supposed to be alive. I thought I was going to die. I felt like I was in prison. I was scared. I was born in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada on December 21st, 1969. My parents, Elio and Duilio Rinaldo, were immigrants from Italy who, of course, like so many millions of others, came to North America looking for a better life, and they put down roots on our 6-acre farm at a very young age. I knew that there was something a little different with me in terms of the way I reacted to people and sounds, and I became infatuated with television and radio. My father and I always had issues in terms of who I was and who he wanted me to be. My dad being your stereotype of the old school immigrant dad, working hard, getting your hands dirty. Life is tough, nothing is easy, nothing's going to be given to you. I was the antithesis of that, and it caused a lot of problems between my father and I growing up. I was an artist. I was very ultra sensitive. I didn't like doing manual chores. And because of that, I became even more ultra shy, where I would lock myself in my room or being almost a mute at home. So in school, I was put in lockers, the kid that was bullied, the kid that was picked on, the kid who was made to feel stupid even though he got great marks. It was not a good time. It was a very depressing time. And thankfully, one friend that I was able to make was Michael John Jansen. We lived not too far away from each other and quickly discovered that we both shared a love of professional wrestling. You know, other kids would make fun of it or whatever, even though most of them were probably watching. I thought, wow, this guy gets it. We were over at each other's house every weekend doing our own wrestling matches. It got to the point we were putting on wrestling matches in the hallway at lunch, where you would think the school, the teachers would say, okay, enough of that, no more. They ended up watching us. There would be like 100 kids making circles because we'd have masks. I'd put together storylines. We'd create this improv theater in the hallway, and people loved it. And we're like, wow, we're popular now. And so he and I just had this incredible bond. We both enjoyed the same thing. We both suffered through the same thing, you know, in terms of socially maybe being a little awkward otherwise with the girls or whatnot. So he became another member of my family. And when I was 16, my best friend and I, Michael John Jansen, went to the high school charity show after practice. The promoter, Al Tomko, was doing the ring announcing. He asked if any one of us had handled a microphone before, and Mike starts laughing, saying, well, Moro's the biggest mouth in the school. He's an announcer. He loves this stuff. I end up announcing the rest of the show. At the end of the show, the promoter comes out of the back smiling, and he goes, what's your name, kid? And I said, Moro Rinaldo. He's like, I think I have some work for you. Are you able to come to the BCTV television studios the following Tuesday? Yes, for sure. Okay, great. See you then. I didn't quite understand what had just happened, but I had gone from being the shy, quirky class clown with dreams of being on television one day and working for All-Star Wrestling to all of a sudden having the promoter of All-Star Wrestling, Al Tomko, invite me to BCTV television studios the following week. My friend Michael Jansen lost his mind, screaming, running down the hallway. Moro's going to be on TV, Moro's going to be on TV. I was just enthralled with what was happening, and I get goosebumps now. I was over the moon, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to become a superstar. My lifelong dream is going to become a reality. On July 7th, 1989, his sister Debbie phoned me. So it was about 6 in the morning. I answered the phone half awake, and I thought that his sister Debbie was laughing, but she was just devastated, crying hysterically, saying that something had happened, that Michael was gone. I hang up the phone, not really being able to absorb what I just heard. I didn't believe it, I guess. I didn't understand. I thought she was making a joke, or I was totally disconnected. It wasn't until I saw my mom that I completely lost it and realized that my best friend had died at the age of 19 due to a heart attack. That set off a spiral downward that resulted in me being hospitalized by my girlfriend at the time. There was a hurricane in my mind. I felt like I was in prison. I was scared. I thought I was going to die. And I was diagnosed with manic depressive disorder. They say that mental health issues is triggered by traumatic events. And it doesn't get more traumatic than losing your best friend at the age of 19. And it's not easy. It's not easy. I got really angry at the doctors and everyone else who had the audacity, the temerity to tell me that there was something wrong with me. I'm living the dream. I'm doing more work than anybody. I'm making more money than anyone I know. I'm helping people. I'm a good person. What do you mean there's something wrong with me in my brain? And my 20s were a complete and utter disaster. But I was hospitalized multiple times, the longest being 3 months. And the toll that it took on my family, my employment, my personal relationships, it is truly, I believe, a miracle that I survived my 20s and my refusal to acknowledge that I was mentally ill. So I did what was necessary. I surrendered myself to treatment. When I finally admitted that, yes, my name is Mauro Ranallo, I suffer from bipolar affective disorder, I need help, then and only then did I finally get to see sustained success in all realms of my life. It almost is because of my dad and the relationship and the struggles that we had that proved to be the fuel that I needed. I continued to fight, and proving to my dad that, hey, your son, A, is not only going to be okay, but B, I went on and became the first broadcaster in network television history to call MMA, boxing, pro wrestling, and kickboxing on network TV. I've called the 2 biggest combat sports pay-per-views in history. That is why I want to share all of my story with people, is because you must never truly give up. And that's why pressure, the cliche says, will either burst pipes or create diamonds. Well, I've burst a lot of pipes, and I'm still that proverbial diamond in the rough, I think. We're all in a fight. Every day is a fight. It's not always a negative thing, a fight. A fight, sometimes you're fighting for your voice to be heard. You're fighting for civil rights. All of us have a gift. Every single human being has a gift and a purpose in life. And for the large majority, fear is precluding them from pursuing their true path. People need people to tell them, you know what? It's going to be tough, but you can do it. People need to stop hearing, no, you're not good enough. No, you're not pretty enough. No, you're not smart enough. Fuck you.
My wife came into my life and started to ask me, why is it that you don't talk to your family that often? And I told her the story, like, I don't think they love me. I don't think they want me. I think they don't appreciate me. I don't think they care, honestly. So my brother is elder than me, about 3 years. And so the grandparents smother him with love. And then my parents smother him with love. So he's getting love from everywhere. What would happen is often I would be wearing the same clothes that he wore to school. Because it was always first used by him, I get everything secondhand. Say there was a mattress on the floor and that was for 2 people, right? That was me and my brother. Now, how brothers are, me and my brother start fighting for space because my brother was bigger than me, so he would push me to a corner. He would go, no, I need more space. I'm bigger, elder than you. And as we were arguing and fighting, my mom stormed out of her room and goes, Ajit, go to sleep. And I'm like, but I can't go to sleep. I don't have enough space, and brother is fighting me for the space, and I can't really sleep in this little space. And my mom goes, no, Ajit, go to sleep. I take my pillow and I bury my head into it and I start sobbing. In India, when somebody is a loved child, they call them Mera Lal, which simply means you're the loved one. All the time I used to say, he's your Lal, I'm your Hara, which means he's the one that you really love and I'm the one that you're indifferent towards or you don't care. What I was really trying to say is I don't feel the love. And why am I hated so much? Our lives started to change a little bit because now I was growing older, I was getting into my teens, and my brother left the city. And as he was moving away, the expectations started to rely a lot more on me. And so it was constantly told, hey, go become an engineer. You need to go become an engineer. You need to study hard so you can become an engineer. And as I was studying for these exams, as I was preparing for these exams, I realized that if what I'm studying right now is what I have to do for the next 4 years, or for the rest of my life, I'm going to be miserable. And that kind of gave me a dimension of saying, hey, why am I doing this? I am doing this because my mom says so. I've taken many chances in life after that, and every time I would take a chance, it would seem like the stupid thing to do, but I will constantly take them because I just knew that what I really wanted to was, I need to be successful, I need to get out of this house. And I was able to do that by the time I was 28, 29. Seven years later, what I'm realizing on the inside is that my health was deteriorating. I couldn't sleep without a drink. I had grown even more distant to my parents. It was almost like it's like a task that you check off. I'm like, I should call mom at least once a week. So it would be one of those things where I'm actually doing something else while she's on speaker, right? So there was no connection. My wife came into my life and started to ask me, why is it that you don't talk to your family that often? And I told her the story, like, I don't think they love me. I don't think they want me. I think they don't appreciate me. I don't think they care, honestly. She kind of said, why don't we do this? We were going to India just to travel. And she was like, why don't we go together? And why don't you bring your parents on and bring your brother and your sister-in-law and their kids to come together, and we'll go to like a retreat center and just hang out for a couple of days, like just 4 or 5 days, just hang out. And I was like, well, I've never done that. We haven't hung out since ever, probably. And so we bring the family together. We find this retreat center close to the city that I'm from, Jaipur, and we all go there. And one of the evenings, and this was I think the second to the last evening, where my now wife and then girlfriend suggested, hey Ajit, we are here. Like, this is the time you can actually have a conversation about this that you've been talking about. And we're sitting all across the table, the same table, and I start sharing. More than me sharing, it was more a question for the table. It was like, okay, what is it that we feel about each other? Let's share some honest truths about each other and what we're proud of, what our concerns are, so forth. And my turn comes and I say, I've never felt loved by mom and dad, and they were right there, and I've never felt that bonding and that connection. And they listen very quietly, and they listen very quietly. They listen and hear me all out. And then my dad asked me a question, and the question was, Ajit, you have two hands, right? I'm like, yes. Like, your right hand and the left hand, which one do you love more? And I was like, both of them. I mean, there's not one hand that I love more. And so he said, that's like having kids. You don't love one of your hands more, and you don't love one of your kids more. But when one of your hand is in some pain, you just pay attention to it. You have to, because it's in pain right now, right? But as soon as it's healed, you don't pay attention to it anymore. You treat them equally. You love them equally. In the moment, it was just a metaphor, but it became my truth eventually. That it's not that somebody loves you or somebody doesn't love you, and especially parents. It's not that you love somebody or don't love somebody. In context, for example, it's me getting an oversized shirt wasn't about they loved my brother. It was about them not being able to afford new shirts all the time. Me getting the second-hand bicycle wasn't about them not wanting to give me a new bicycle, but it was about them being able to only afford one bicycle at a time. That was a big release for me, because I had held on to that for all of my life, and I was driven from a place of, I'll show you. Only recently, when we actually had a child, I realized that as much power the word love has, it doesn't do justice to what you feel when you have a child. What I have for my son, I can't explain. I can't explain because it transcends love. It's important that we know how loved we are. The fact that we take up space means something, that we are worthy of love, giving and receiving. And that no matter who we are, the way we show up in the world is deserving of love. And if ever you feel unloved, remember that all you need to do is change your perspective, for love is always there.
I
was in a crib and 2 adults were yelling, but my mom came in the crib and was like, it's okay. And I can remember my mom crying. So my very earliest memory as a human is instability. My dad was he was a pro bodybuilder. He was a big, strong guy. And I would tell people about my dad like he was still in my life. I never told them, because they'd be like, well, where's your dad? And I'd be like, oh, he's busy, he can't come. But the truth was, he didn't care that much. My mom says, Ty, when I was pregnant with you, the FBI kicked down the door with guns, put guns in my face, took your dad away, and brought him across the country to Terminal Island off Long Beach. I remember it was my birthday. My dad, when he got out of prison, he just stayed in Long Beach. But for that birthday, my dad's like, I will drive down and take you out to dinner. And he said he'd be there at like 5 p.m. and she had to go to work. She had a night shift job. And she's like, okay, your dad will be here soon, so I'm gonna leave you at the house alone. So I sat there, I was kind of on the couch, and I remember waiting for my dad. And it was like 5:30 came, nothing. 6, nothing. We had a home landline. I'm like waiting for the phone to ring. 7, 8. I remember being like super sad going, but you're a little kid, so you're like, oh, I have hope. Like, he's still gonna come. He's just late, he's just late, he's just late. I don't remember how long it was, but my mom said she came home at midnight. I was just asleep, like literally like on the couch, just like looking out the window, and he never came. And so I remember that being like super painful and being just like, my dad doesn't care about me. Life will throw tremendous blows at you. You'll have the betrayal of a close friend or family member. You'll have, sickness, death. Life is painful if I perceive it as what it was supposed to be. But the second I switch it and go, wait, no, life's like a puzzle that I was handed. Here's your puzzle of life, Ty. We took a piece out. The dad was gone. And when I look at life like that, my life's like an adventure. And I'm thankful for it. Even the stuff that sucked in the most painful day, and sometimes in the moment, I couldn't see it there. But in hindsight, I'm like, but I wouldn't have found that puzzle piece. Nobody in my family had ever really made money. And, they say poverty is systemic, and it's true. Like most people, you can't rise out of like your socioeconomic class. Like one of the biggest predictors of where you'll be in life is where you're born. It sucks. Breaking the cycle is something that has to start happening in the world. And what broke the cycle for me was like realizing that I was doing it wrong. I was in a mobile home in Clayton, North Carolina, and I did not have a job. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have anything to put on a resume. I didn't have a college degree, just laying there on the couch. And when I was laying there, the question that came in my head was, is this it? All my friends went to college. They had parents that had more money and they had this, and like, I missed this. I remember just going to sleep. I was just depressed. And the next day, my mom was there and she said, you should read this book, Tony Robbins. And I remember being like, oh, I don't want some self-help book. But she's like, yeah, you should read this book. So I read it. And I don't remember that much of what I read, but I remember there's one page and it said, all greatness starts with failure. Because when you succeed, you party. And when you fail, you ponder. And all greatness comes from pondering your situation. And I remember thinking, that's what I was doing last night on the couch. I was like pondering, like, what did I do wrong? And I made myself vulnerable to the fact that maybe I did make mistakes. Maybe I had to change my life. Maybe I had to listen to different people. Maybe I had to try a new path. Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results. And I'm like, Ty, you're being stubborn. So after I read that book, I was like, I'm gonna try something new. So I went back in that mobile home, I found a Yellow Pages, and I remember flipping through it, going to the financial section, and there was this full page ad by this guy, Mike Stainback. It said Stainback Financial Services. And I kind of pretended, I didn't lie, but I kind of pretended I was coming there to be a customer. And I get to the place and I'm like, I'm Ty, can I speak to your boss? And I'll never forget, he was sitting in like this big lazy boy chair, and he had this big mustache. He looked like Tom Selleck. I wanted to be super honest with him. I said, listen, Mike, you don't know who I am, but I know you must be successful because you got a full page ad in the Yellow Pages. That's all I know about you, but I know that costs a lot of money. If you teach me what you know about making money, I'll work for you for free. and he was sitting like in this chair, and I was talking to him this way and he was sideways, and he just slowly pivoted his chair. You know, I've been looking for someone like you for 20 years. You come back in the morning and I'll set you up with your own office and you can work for me. And I promise you, if you listen to what I'm gonna say, one day you'll hug my neck. And he did have an office, but what he had done was he cleaned out a closet with no windows, and he had put a desk, that's where all the filing cabinets was. And I sat down on the chair and he plopped down pieces of paper and said, cold call these people. I'll give you a percentage of the money you make from them. No guarantees working for me. So I just started calling, and I sucked at it. I would call people at 6, and after 6 at night. People were like, who are you? And they were hanging up on me. I remember being like, oh no, I think I've gone from nightmare to another nightmare. But I started to get curious and creative. And I wrote down a few little different things I would say to the people. And I remember in that first month, I started opening up deals for this Mike Steinbeck guy. And I opened a deal that was $150,000 in commissions if the deal went through. And I remember going, wow, life can change like fast. And within 9 months, I went from $0 to making 100 grand. And I remember being like, this is the pinnacle of my life. And I went out from then like a madman. I became a CFP, a certified financial planner. I got into finance. I learned, I read every book. You can either be paralyzed by what life gave you and let the pain, because there will be pain, there will be trauma. You can either let it build up and like build scar tissue that just paralyzes you, or at some point you go, the cards weren't dealt for me like I wanted, and so I'm gonna go recreate those cards. And that's what mentors were for me. And I think for every person, you got a different path that you have to do. I just spoke on this subject that I think is like the ultimate puzzle piece. You get this down, most of your problems go away. I call it the law of 33%. Basically, you should spend 33% of your day around people who have not accomplished what you've accomplished yet. You can help them, like you mentor them. And there's always those people, and you need to spend time around people that you can help. And then you spend 33% of your time around people who are on your level. Like you're about at the same level of what you're trying to do. Those are become your close friends. You know, those are the people you hang out with on the weekends. But the last 33% is the magical one that doesn't happen in our school system, and almost no one even tries to find these people, unfortunately. You should spend 33% of your time around people who are 5, 10, 20, 30 years ahead where you want to be. And if you do the math, you know, that's like a couple hours a day. And now you can do it with YouTube videos. You can do it with a book. You can do it with an audio book. You can do it with Facebook videos. If you can start absorbing from the world's greatest mind, downloading their advice into your brain, their 40 years of experience in pain and reward and making mistakes and accomplishing great things, and you basically get like a cheat sheet. And if you can absorb that, and this is what I tell myself every day I wake up, it's like, Ty, law 33%, who you spending time with? I think the most pain that we get in life is when we think life is like a straight line, start, finish, and here's what's supposed to happen. Nothing's supposed to happen. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes the puzzle pieces swap out and you can't overreact. In life, if you want to have a complete life, you go find a piece. You put the piece back in. You have to take your destiny in your own hand and try to recreate what you missed out on. For good or bad, today I control my own destiny.